That, of course, is the classic Steve Lukather solo from the song Rosanna. It's a song I learned a long time ago. I didn't just learn the notes. I learned a lot from what Steve played and how he played it. Not just that solo, but the solo at the end of the song. And it brings to mind a question I get asked a lot. Should I learn other people's licks? It's a question that seems to have a pretty obvious answer to me, although recently I've heard a few other guitar teachers paint learning licks in a negative light. There are some pitfalls to learning licks, and I'll address those right up front. The most extreme negative example I can give you happened recently when a new student showed up for a first lesson. We talked on the phone and he was very enthusiastic. He kept telling me about his chops and all the things he could play. I said, great. He came in, he sat down and I said, well, show me what you can do. And he plays what admittedly was a very cool lick. I said, great, what was that? He replied, some lick I learned off of YouTube. I said, great, do you know what key it's in? He said, no. I said, do you know what scale you were using when you played that lick? He said, no. I asked him if he knew any scales other than that, and he only knew the first position of minor pentatonic, and then only at A minor. And when I asked him how to play it in various keys, he said, well, how many keys are there? So here's a guy that had put in a lot of hours to learn a few very hard licks. He'd spent thousands of dollars on a great guitar and a really nice amp, but he didn't know anything about playing music. No songs, no theory, no scales, and only a few chords. And a few licks that he'd learned like a parrot, but he couldn't use them at all. There was no context, no understanding. Now that's obviously a very extreme case and a relatively new phenomenon, as learning licks from YouTube has gotten very popular. A more common problem, and one that's been around as long as people have been playing guitar more than likely, is learning a lick, again in isolation or maybe in the context of a song, and then doing nothing else with it. The lick kind of dies there and does nothing else for your musical development other than you put in the time on the instrument to learn it. I have a saying, don't just learn a lick, learn from the lick. What I mean by that is don't just learn a lick or a phrase and be done with it. Absorb what the lick is saying. Learn from the phrasing. Learn the theory behind it. Learn to use it in different songs. Use it when you improvise and alter it so you can turn one lick into 10 different licks. That's what this video is about. I'm Charlie Long. Thanks for checking out my channel. Please like the video and subscribe, as there is so much more lesson content on the way. Let's dive in. So let's get right down to it. If you're going to take the time to learn other people's licks, do it in a way that's going to move your guitar playing forward. The approach that doesn't move your playing forward is to sort of mindlessly learn where to put your fingers to play a lick or a phrase, but that's all you get out of it. I call this the parrot style of learning. A parrot can learn to mimic words, but the parrot's not actually learning to speak or understand how to have a conversation. Likewise, I've had students come to me that have taken the time to learn, for instance, an entire Joe Satriani song full of great licks, but if I asked them to improvise, it wouldn't even occur to them to try to use some of the great licks that they learned from that song because they learned it parrot style. Again, no thought other than to learn where to put their fingers. The way to learn a lick that does move your playing forward is to not only learn where to put your fingers, but to learn why the lick works from a theory standpoint, to understand where and how you can apply that lick to other situations, to learn it well enough that you can play it in various other places around the fretboard. You can play it in other keys than the one you learned it in, and you can even change it around on the fly if you're improvising. In other words, you truly make it part of your usable musical vocabulary. Think about how we learn to speak. When we're babies, we learn by listening and imitating. I think we should do the same thing as musicians. Think about all the time and work that other players have put into learning how to play. By listening and absorbing what they play, we're getting the benefit of their efforts. We've all heard a player we like do something really great and we think, wow, I want to play like that. Getting inspired to learn something another player did is a rite of passage that every great player I know of has gone through. Now, as we get older and we start to develop our language skills with schooling, think about all the time we spend learning new vocabulary words. We have to learn how to spell them, and then we get to ask to use them in a sentence. I can remember reading stories that were written specifically to use the new vocabulary words so that we could learn how they worked in the context of sentences and paragraphs. That is where people go wrong learning licks. It's comparable to be introduced to a new word, maybe learning how to spell it, but not learning the definition of it, not learning how to use it in a sentence, not recognizing what it means in the context of a paragraph, that seems pointless, right? The lesson here is to learn a lick like you would learn a new word that you're going to put into your vocabulary for the rest of your life. Let me give you some examples. So this is how to learn somebody else's lick and make it work for you. Learn the lick with the intention of not just using it in the song you learned it from or to learn it in isolation, but as part of your permanent musical vocabulary. How do we do that? Well, you can start by breaking down the theory of the lick. What intervals are being played in the lick against the chords that you're playing over? Why does that lick sound good? Let's take a simple lick. For instance, the melody line of Gary Moore's great song, Still Got the Blues. The line goes like this. And he sort of repeats that figure over chords. Now, the first two chords that he plays that over, he's got D minor 7 and G7. Well, that lick works because he's playing over the D minor, he's playing the 5, which is an A note. He's playing the 1, which is a D. He's playing the 2, which is an E note, and then he's playing the minor third, which is an F. And then he descends back down to D, which is now over the G7 chord. D is the 5th of G7. So there's a lot of chord tones in that little musical figure. It sounds great. That's why that lick works over the chord changes D minor 7 to G7. Now, you want to take that further, you could take that lick and play it in every key. Play it in B flat. Play it in G. Play it in other spots on the fretboard. What if we played it on some lower registers? And other string sets. It still works. It sounds great. You can change it around and make other licks out of it. You know, for instance, you could ask yourself the question, is there a rhythmic motif you can use? A motif is a statement that is identifiable when you're playing music. So the rhythm of this is very identifiable. You could take that and just mess around with that rhythm. And come up with licks just using the rhythmic motif. Is there an intervallic pattern you can use? Yes. Now, think about this. He's using a chord tone, which is the 5th, jumping to the 1st, and then going straight up the scale. So 5, 1, 2, 3. Well, what if we go up to the next chord tone? Let's go to the 1, jump to the chord tone after that, which is the 3rd, minor 3rd. So you've taken the first lick, you've used the same intervallic pattern, jumping from chord tone to chord tone, and then ascending up 3 notes. Let's do it one more time. Let's jump up to the minor 3rd. So I've taken one lick, turned it into 3 just by using the same intervallic pattern. That's a great trick to use. Change the phrasing. We could take the original lick and make it a pedal point type lick where we are alternating between the lower note and the higher notes as we play. That sounds kind of cool. What if we add a note or two at the beginning or the end? So now we're really starting to, I would call it improvise, but we've taken that original lick, we're altering it, we're adapting it, we're making it our own. Would that same lick work over other chords? Could you take a minor lick like this one and make it major? That's kind of cool. Once you've started to do some adaptation, some improvisation, use this lick. Put on a backing track, make it work. Don't worry about mistakes. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. I want to share a quick story. There's a wonderful modern blues player by the name of Josh Smith. Josh, if you haven't heard of him, has an incredible vocabulary. He can play everything from country to blues to jazz to rock and roll. I heard him in an interview talk about the process that he uses when he learns licks. He hears a lick that excites him and he learns it immediately. He gets it under his fingers. And then he's very brave about going out and using that lick immediately on a gig. If he has a gig that night, he has a gig the next day. He said he'll take a lick that he's just learned and he'll play it. He'll throw that lick in 30, 40 times a night, all kinds of songs, all kinds of keys, and that's how he makes it a permanent part of his working musical vocabulary. That is such a great story and a great lesson. What I want to do now is give you an example of all the things we've been talking about. The solo I played at the very beginning of the video is a Steve Lukather solo from the song Rosanna. It's a short but classic solo. It's fairly simple from a theory standpoint, but it's got some great phrasing techniques in it and several cool usable licks. I'm also going to pull a lick out of the ending solo of Rosanna. There's one lick in particular that it's played with a rock attitude, but it's got some cool jazzy elements, some chromaticism that really caught people's ear back in the day, caught my ear, and it still catches people's ear. Really cool stuff. The solo section in the main part of the song is in the key of F. He starts off by playing a little ascending line. Simple stuff, no big deal, but it's got kind of a cool rhythmic thing to it. Then he does a little pedal point lick. That he finishes off with a cool bluesy, bendy pull-off thing. Then he goes into a longer, a little bit faster, it's mostly pentatonic scale, but he also converts to the blues scale, and he throws in the fourth interval to create a little tension. And then he finishes things up with some really cool, aggressive bends. The last bend he does, he bends up a whole step, then he does a cool little move with his pinky to hit a note on top of the already bent note. So it was a really cool technique. It goes like this. So each one of those licks are their own musical statement. And the point being, by breaking down the solo into those bite-sized portions and sort of analyzing what's going on with each part, you gain an understanding of each lick, and that will allow you to use them when you improvise or when you compose your own solos. I'm going to play these licks over a D minor blues vamp. I'm going to do something a little different. They're originally played in the key of F over more of a shuffle beat. I'll be playing them now over the relative minor key. So there's some adaptation and improvisation that's going to happen, and that only serves to deepen my understanding of the licks and ingrain them more in my musical memory. Check it out. Hey, I really hope this video has given you some ideas that you can use to really own the guitar licks that you put in the work to learn. Hope it moves your guitar playing forward. I look forward to seeing you again. Please like and subscribe. Thanks, and I'll see you soon.